Jun of the Jun Show, and tonight. Hi, this is Jun of the Jun Show. Hi, this is Jun of the Jun Show. This is Jun and welcome to the relaunch of a new season. Jun season. Hello. Hi, good evening. This is Jun of the Jun Talk Show, and welcome. Tonight we have a very distinguished, prominent guest, and we welcome you once again because the topic is very timely in today's critical times regarding the environment and political will as well. And our guest tonight is an expert. He is an architect and graduated from the University of Santo Tomas with an architectural degree, and then proceeded on scholarship at the University of the Philippines to take his master's. And then afterwards, he proceeded on to the United States at the very prestigious Harvard University to get a diploma in management of design and real estate, and thereafter he has been, overachieving in all his projects, involved both locally and internationally, and he's such a bemedaled architect that he has been recognized the world over. And he has had his first project in Dubai, and he has really impressed the authorities in Dubai, and he's practically rebuilt Dubai from a fourth world country to a first world, and thereafter he has been such a hot expert that all our private and government officials here have been trying to get a hold of him. And now we're lucky tonight because he's here with us to share his wisdom and his recommendations for, according to him, the Philippines, his vision for the Philippines in 500 years, which coincidentally will fall in the year 2021, which is very critical for the Philippines and the world. So please welcome tonight, we have with us the very amiable, overachieving architect Felino Jun Palafox. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Jun Talk Show.
Good evening, Alma, and it's a privilege and a pleasure to join your show. And thank you for the opportunity to share with your viewers and listeners.
You're welcome, sir. It's an honor to have you with us, and thank you for accepting to guest with us tonight. And tell us, sir, your advocacy about particularly about the Philippines, your vision for the Philippines 500 is a very popular tagline among everybody, and you have been talking about your recommendations on how you would envision the Philippines to be with all this global warming, climate change in the environment today. So would you like to start off by talking about your recommendations?
From my role as an architect, urban planner, environmental planner, development consultant, as a Filipino, this is the only country we have, and our country has so much development potential. And from the 1930s to the 1970s, we were number 2 in Asia, second only to Japan. But then corruption, criminality, climate change not being addressed more effectively, poverty, pollution, there's too much politics, and problems with the police, and housing and healthcare, agriculture, and some issues with the armed forces, infrastructure, and incompetence. These are the challenges we have. But I am still very optimistic the future of our country because we have so much blessings for our country. We're number 1 in the world in marine biodiversity. We're number 1 in the world in seafarers, sailors. We're number 1 now in the world in call centers. We're number 2 in the world in geothermal energy. We're number 2 in the world in BPOs. We have the third longest coastline in the world. In some countries, they go to war because they don't have enough waterfront, like Iraq invading Kuwait. Kuwait was blocking the waterfront of Iraq. And while I was in Dubai, Dubai had only 70 kilometers of waterfront. So the rulers of Dubai, they decided to reclaim from the sea the Palm Islands just to artificially increase their waterfront, prime real estate. We're number 4 in the world in gold reserves. In gold. We're number 4 in shipbuilding. We're number 5 in all other mineral resources. We're number 12 in human resources. And the Filipino expatriate is the preferred employees of employers all over the world. Kings, rulers, sheikhs, queens, presidents, prime ministers, schools, colleges, hospitals, developers, construction, cruise ship, what have you. There are more Filipinos in more countries than members of the United Nations. And even me, I was named hard when I was 26 years old to help plan Dubai, bring it from the third or fourth world well into the 21st century. But one thing they had in Dubai, which our leaders can learn from, Dubai has visionary leadership. They have strong political will, good planning. They recognize the benefits of good urban planning, good design like architecture, engineering, and good governance or good management. And the leaders are not integrity challenged, and they are not intellectually challenged. And these are the ingredients, whether it's the leaders of Dubai, the leaders of Singapore, the leaders of the Scandinavian countries, the mayors of New York, and so on. These are the ingredients of success. And when I was the first architect urban planner to be president of the Management Association of the Philippines, which was quite an honor and privilege because the 800 membership is composed of CEOs of the largest firms and multinationals in our country. And when in my presidency of Management Association of the Philippines in 2011, our theme was mapping, it was MAP, mapping a culture of integrity, addressing corruption, criminality, and climate change. Because if we address those three effectively, we should be and can be in the top 20 economies of the world. So what I've been doing, and my colleagues at Palafox Architecture and Palafox Associates, architects, urban planners, environmental planners, engineers, designers, we take pictures of the uglification of our cities. And why are our cities so ugly? The ones deciding on the built environment are politicians, lawyers, and contractors. We architects and urban planners who are marginalized. Elsewhere in the world, the architects and urban planners and engineers are very well recognized. And in fact, having done work in 39 countries, I feel like I have better recognition, appreciation, and they even pay me better elsewhere in the world than in my country. And we have so many colonial baggages like intramuros and extramuros that was introduced by King Philip of Spain for Las Islas Filipinas and Latin America. Intramuros for the Ilustrados and the Principalia, if you are rich, powerful, and connected. Extramuros, if you were a peasant, an Indio or Sanglai, Chinese merchants. Almost 500 years ago, is still the same practice here. If you are an ordinary Filipino outside the gated communities, people complain about traffic. Where we are today, Makati Central Business Districts, the daytime population is 11 times the nighttime population. So you have the challenge, the problem of bringing in the 11 times population in the morning and bringing them out in the evening. I think the same with Ortigas Center, Fort Bonifacio, Araneta Center, and so on. Because our central business district are strangulated by gated communities. If you superimpose, let's say, other business districts elsewhere in the world, like maybe Singapore, Hong Kong, New York, Tokyo, London, Paris, every 200 feet or 70 meters, there's an access road. But in our central business districts, you have to go around 2 kilometers around the villages. And the ordinary employees of the Central Business District waste about 2 to 3 hours a day in traffic. If you have an economic life of 40 years, you would have wasted maybe 30,000 man-hours in traffic. What a waste. And then people tell us corruption is $15 billion a year. When I was asked to help in the building back better, safer, smarter, more sustainable, the Yolanda Corridor, my estimate was we needed only $8 billion US dollars to rebuild the Yolanda Corridor. So somebody told me, architect, if there's no corruption for 7 months, you have your $8 billion to reconstruct. And with that $15 billion, there should be no 28 million poor Filipinos. We could feed them, shelter them, clothe them, educate them. And unfortunately, when it's all sloganeering, because selective justice, those close to the powerful, they don't get investigated by the ombudsman, the DOJ secretary, by the COA, they get scot-free. So, having selective justice, you will not be addressing corruption. And for me, I spent 4 years of my life in the seminary. Corruption comes from 2 Latin words, cor, the heart, rapture, to break. So we are a broken-hearted society because of corruption. Or corrupture, breaking down together as a nation. And fighting corruption is a corporal works of mercy. Because the worst sufferers of corruption are the poorest of the poor. And then fast forward, when I went to Harvard, I was a guest lecturer in Harvard and MIT in Massachusetts before I became a student of Harvard. I was a student 8 times, 1 diploma and 7 certificates of continuing education, architecture, urban planning, real estate, sustainability. And one of my professors, we were 19 from 4 continents. I was the only Asian. After teaching us all the best practices in architecture, urban planning, real estate development, sustainability, there was a professor who comes to the room and said, "You're dying tonight. Write your eulogy. And who among your friends and relatives will read your eulogy?" Then all of us had writer's block. And then he says, "You don't have to pass your papers. You're dying tonight. What legacy you can leave behind your children and future generations." Every night before I go to sleep, that's already part of my evening prayers. So 4 years in the seminary in Harvard is like the 2 bookends of my education. And I've been very fortunate, maybe having been in the right place at the right time, because looking back, practically I did not apply for a job. Yeah, the job comes to me, like invited to work in Dubai, invited to work in Ayala, invited to work with the Henry C. Group, invited to work with the Lopez Group, Rockwell, and so on, invited to speak in 19 countries. So maybe the chief architect up there have been very generous to me with the blessings. But we Filipinos, we should not be afraid to fight corruption, because only 1% of Filipinos are corrupt. The 98.99% are either scared, cowards, or don't care anymore. When there's no briber, there's no bribing. If nobody reports corruption, corruption will go on. And if you believe in your faith, it's written in the Bible more than 366 times. Fear not, do not be afraid. And the corrupt politicians, they just change, reform, return the money they stole, and they can still go to heaven. After all saints were sinners except the Blessed Virgin Mary. So there's a lot of hope. And God has blessed our country, the 3rd longest coastline in the world, number 1 in marine biodiversity, very nice people, beautiful islands, and so on. I think we have so much brain power in this country. So much brain power. The Philippines is 400 times the size of Singapore, 350 times the size of Hong Kong. 8 times the size of Taiwan, 3 times the size of South Korea. What it brought us down? Corruption, criminality, climate change, not addressing poverty, pollution. There's too much politics and so on. And there's so much lack of infrastructure and so much incompetence. And we, taxpayers, we should be more vigilant. Because even the corrupt, they spend so much money on their press releases and so much money to bribe people to destroy the credibility of those whistleblowers and those who are the truth tellers speaking the truth for our nation building. And on March 16, 2021, we'll already be 500 years old as the Philippines, 500 years old as a Christian nation, 500 years anniversary of the Western civilization introduced to us. And that's a good milestone date because what we're doing now is, as I said, taking pictures of the uglification of the cities and drawing up architectural designs, urban design perspectives, and how they should look like in the future. Doing urban planning 2016 to 2021 and 100 years hence. 2021 to 2121, more than 100 years. And that's a short time because as I said, as you entered here, I have 12 clients in the conference room now. We have been hired to design 9 buildings designed for 1,000 years in Kathmandu after the big earthquake. 1 cancer hospital, 1 university, and 3 schools. And we're designing those buildings good for 1,000 years, even if my professional liability is only 25 years. And see the confidence other nationalities have in us, Filipino architects, Palafox Architecture, and Palafox Associates.
So much to say, architect, and congratulations. We're proud of you. So, you were talking about, corruption as the root evil for why our beautiful country is not as beautiful as it should be. How would you, admittedly, sometimes our authorities, they do have the heart and the intention to serve well for the country, except that probably they don't know how. So usually, when there are manuals there for procedures and policies, which will guide them or, sort of cut out the repeating wasteful tasks so that they're guided. They should each have, a systematized scientific way of going about managing the country, plus the fact that perhaps our country is composed of over 7,000 islands, which is really hard to manage, unlike, for instance, Europe or the United States, where it's a big chunk of land and it's easier for economy for trade to go back and forth. And the fact that we are not as blessed temperature-wise, it's so hard to work when the climate is so hot, unlike, for instance, the cooler economies of the United States and Europe, where it's easier to work because it's cool. And the fact that it's hard to put all these infrastructures and connect all the different islands, it's very expensive. So how would you suggest to go about, because actually we could also make use of what the gifts we have and the resources that because we have so many beautiful beaches. We're an island archipelago nation, and so we can sort of beautify the Philippines to sort of come up with a resort country type of thing. And with our overachieving architect here, who can help all the authorities in urban planning, to develop all the countryside, as well as to beautify and correct the uglification, according to architect, the uglification of our cities and the country, which doesn't do justice to the beautiful Filipinos. So how else can you recommend, architect?
What's happening now is do nothing scenarios. In the Manila Transport Land Use Development Planning Projects, metro plan, where at age 25 to 27, I was appointed as team leader for development planning. We had more than 300 recommendations. And in those planning strategies and design charrette and discussions, we already saw what's happening today. Do nothing scenario, it will be catastrophic for traffic, catastrophic for flooding, catastrophic for infrastructure. And the do nothing scenario happened. The plans were put in place 1975-77. In fact, it was in that Metro Plan Manila that the ruling class of Dubai came over to invite me to help Dubai. My recommendations in Dubai, I was one of 20 expats from 14 countries, and I was the youngest and the only Southeast Asian and only Filipino. They did not just follow our recommendations, every year they keep updating it. And Dubai really is leadership and innovation. Singapore the same. Do we really have leadership and innovation here? And we have so many obsolete laws that make us less globally competitive, like building permits, development permits. 44 signatories. I call it obstacle course for corruption. In fact, I went to one, I saw a mayor and a building official. They told me for my occupancy permit, they need 15 working days, excluding holidays. And what I told them, I used to work for a foreign government in Dubai. I could do that in 15 minutes. That's why there's so much corruption. You delay. Supposing the developer borrowed 1 billion pesos from the bank. Every day of delay, how much the cost of money? That's why people bribe. I was a student activist, National Union of Students. And at that time, we were complaining about 5%, 7% corruption in 1970. Now I saw a developer, he was complaining, he was sharing it with me. He paid 4 million pesos for permits. His official receipt was 30,000 pesos. That's 99% corruption. So corruption 2016 is worse than corruption 1970. So that time we were talking of complaining, demonstrating in Menjola Bridge, corruption 5%, 7%. Today it's 99% according to a developer. And by 1992, in 1984, because we were the ones who put forward the light rail transit in 1976, we're the first ones who put that forward. 1984, my friends in Singapore were telling me that in 1984 we had one of the best, most modern LRTs in the world. 1984. In Metro Plan Manila 75 to 77, when I was team leader for development planning, by 1992 we should have had 8 lines already. The past 10 years, not a single train was added. I spent the New Year in Dubai. They now have their light rail transit. And I go to Dubai now, I don't even have to rent a car, because the first couch of the train, first class, business class. The second is for women and children, and the rest of the train for everybody else. So they are able to entice the car owners to ride the train. And they penalize the use of the car, congestion charging. Every time you enter Dubai, you pay something like 60 pesos. Every time you cross the bridge, across the Dubai Creek, you pay 50 pesos or 60 pesos. So and parking is very expensive. We had put that forward in 1976, congestion charging. During peak hours, congested streets, you pay a toll to enter, so you postpone your trip. I had recommendations like maybe double the toll fee entering Metro Manila. Going up is free. During weekdays, these are no-brainers. And parking on street is a congestion, because when you park your car in the street or a car gets towed along EDSA, you're reducing the capacity of EDSA or the street by 700 to 2,000 vehicles per lane per hour. Our transport policy and public works policy, it's still biased for the automobile, and only 2% of us are car owners. The 98%, 100% of us are pedestrians. Yeah, once you leave your car, you're a pedestrian. and yet they don't fix the sidewalks. And we have sidewalks, they use it for parking or for vendors. Who is making money on the sidewalks? And there are 20 kinds of urban transport. First mode is walking, then bicycle, then the different modes of transportation like rail-based buses and so on. 1976 already recommended the bus dedicated lanes and so on, and even the salaries of bus drivers should be fixed. They're still on boundary system or whatever, so they are chasing each other, hunting for passengers. And these are no-brainer. You don't have to be a genius to analyze it. During the flooding of Ondoy, I was in Dubai. Somebody called me up in the media, and architect Palafox. Somebody blamed God for the flooding, and I said, no, it's not an act of God. That's sin of omission of men and women running our country. Because the solutions for flooding, we put it forward when I was 25 years old. I'm already 66 years old, and do nothing scenario. Our leaders did nothing, like the Parañaque spillway and so on. That was, I think I was still a student at UP when that was put forward. And we had so many recommendations, Laguna Lake, nothing's being done. And the American Corps of Engineers, 1945, before the Americans left, we became a republic. They proposed 6 circumferential roads. Until now, we don't have circumferential road number 6. And that was proposed 70 years ago, 71 years ago. And yeah, and I had proposed 10 circumferential roads to interconnect Metro Manila, Calvarson, Central Luzon, and a bridge or a tunnel at the mouth of Manila Bay connecting Bataan and Cavite, so that people from Cavite going to Subic, they don't have to mess around with the traffic in Metro Manila anymore. They just cross the bridge or the tunnel, and that bridge or tunnel, we could put the wave breakers to protect Rojas Boulevard, Manila Bayfront from tsunamis and storm surge. Okay, very, very simple solution. In year 2006, I was a speaker in New York, the 60th anniversary of the United Nations. And I had proposed to interconnect the 6 continents of the world with bridges and tunnels. After I spoke, the comments from the audience were, oh, this crazy Filipino, what's he talking about? You know, the next day, scientists, developers, engineers from the US, Russia, China, Japan, Europe, Korea, they were congratulating me. They said they made the calculations of my proposal during the night. It's cheaper than the Gulf War. So when I came back to the Philippines, I proposed to interconnect all our islands. Left here you have the maglev, just like the one they have in Shanghai. I met the manufacturers of the maglev. They came to see me. From Lawag to Zamboanga, a little more than 2 hours. If you have the maglev, interconnect. And I was able to entice funders from all over the world. But again, there's no political will to follow my advice. But when we were working on Guimaras Island, I was paid by the Lopezes because at the time we were the architects of Rockwell. The Lopezes, I think, owned 600 hectares out of the 65,000 hectares of Guimaras. Interconnect Guimaras, Iloilo and Panay Island, and Negros by bridges. It's doable. In fact, with that proposal, foreign investors, foreign funders were willing to fund it. In 2004, we won the master planning for the redevelopment of NAIA, our Manila International Airport. Nothing was done since 2004, and we were paid for that. Clark Airport, Clark Aerotropolis, airport-driven city. I worked on that 1998. And what happened? So, all these proposals now, infrastructure bill, only very few are being recycled, proposed by previous administrations. And part of my advocacy now as a taxpayer, as a Filipino, after helping 39 countries, I'm now trying to help our country, and I call it architectural activism, patriotic architecture, or architecture for humanity, architecture for the urban poor, architecture of urban faith, of interfaith. Just like the Sultan of Brunei, I'm not a Muslim, but they hired us to with the architects for the largest mosque in the country in Cotabato City. Investments from Kuwait, Global Gateway City in Clark. He committed $1 to $3 billion, and again they name hired us to do it just across the airport, Aerotropolis Airport-driven city. I had a term paper in Harvard, Manila Megalopolis 2020. We will need 3 international airports. One for Calabarzon, we don't have that. One for Metro Manila, and I had proposed either Laguna Lake or Cavite, Sangli. And one for Central Luzon, you already have Clark. Until now, suffering from analysis paralysis. They don't know whether it's Manila or Clark. We need both plus one. Because by that time, we'll have maybe 30 million people. And most megalopolis in the world, megalopolis is joining together several metropolitan areas like Metropolitan Clark, Metropolitan Subic, Metropolitan Batangas, Metropolitan San Pablo, and maybe create counter magnets, urban growth centers all over the country, like maybe Metropolitan Lawag, Digan, San Fernando, Tarlac, up to Zamboanga. By the way, we're doing the planning for urban planning for Zamboanga. We just won it. We finished the tourism master plan for Ilocos Norte. We've done Balanga Bataan, Puerto Princesa, and Red Islands, provincial planning for some. And I say, if we have 1,600 local government leaders, units, 10% of them are very good. The 90%, they can be better. But if you can just focus on the 10% good, having done work in several countries, I'm inviting foreign investors to go to the good ones, and hopefully those who need improvement will follow.
Okay, so we have a lot of, nuggets of wisdom, big and small, from our prominent architect here. And we should like to return after a few words. Thank you, and see you shortly.